Give us the most important piece of news, Josh.
I will. How about that? I will.
Okay.
The big thing about this is because we've been talking about digital versus physical a lot. We've been talking about things like, Xbox maybe making a console that can't take, a disc anymore. We've been talking about just the very nature of physical going away. Well, now we have a very interesting thing with the new Star Wars game that comes out later this year, Star Wars Outlaws, I believe.
It's like an open world Star Wars game.
It's open world Star Wars.
Looks pretty fun.
It is an Ubisoft game.
Oh,
So
no.
Hoping for the best. Not prepared for it.
Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Star Wars.
Yes. So here's the kind of the drop that came out for this is that the game on disc will have a mandatory day one update. The disc won't even work without it. So you now have crossed into the point of the disc is functionally useless without the patch on the server side. So we talk about digital versus physical. This is digital literally infecting the physical copy. That physical copy won't work unless you can get the patch. Now, traditionally what happens, you get the day one patch, which fixes a lot of problems. But if you were to plug in, unplug from the internet, put that disc in and install, there's some game there that you would start playing. Maybe it's totally broken. That's oftentimes what they do. They ship out what they had, they fix it later. But in this case, it sounds like if you were to have an offline console, plug that game in, that disc won't even work. So that's cool.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
It's inevitable. I don't like it because I actually think from a legal perspective, what they'll have to print on the box to indicate this to consumers who buy it physically, because if you're saying you buy the game and it does not work, think of any object, any item that you buy.
Right.
If you went to the store and were like, I'm going to buy this new car, and they're like, thanks for the $50,000 for this new $30,000, whatever, for this new car.
So,
and then you're like, but you can't drive.
Apparently, this isn't even the first game for this to happen. So the reason why people found this out is that their Avatar Frontiers of Pandora game had this notice on the box that says, internet required to install the game. So you can't even install the disc. Now, the people have said they have seen the box art for Star Wars Outlaws. The same message is there.
Look how small the rating symbol is normally.
Right.
Big enough to be seen, but small enough to not
Right.
block all the artwork. Right. It's literally a third the size.
Right. As the ERSB logo.
ESRB.
ESRB. SERB.
ESRB.
So that is the big kind of the thing that dropped. Now, the other thing about it was, they dropped that it's coming out in October, that it's coming out, and that it's an Ubisoft game. We knew it was an Ubisoft game, I guess, but, it's an Ubisoft game. So a lot of people are saying, like, hey, great, Ubisoft games, 2 months in, are $40.
That's right.
But again, on a disc,
Less
that
than
then
that.
is kind of not useful, really.
I'm really curious about, for this kind of a game, for this kind of a game experience, how much of this is the way of the future and how this will be for other games going forward. But I also wonder, what is, if any, the advantage of going this way? Let's play devil's advocate a little bit. I'm certainly going to lean way more towards physical than I am towards digital.
Correct.
But, let's say, hey, having this digital infrastructure to play and enjoy interactive entertainment, video games. Here, look at the advantage you have. What's the advantage, you think?
Well, of putting this out like this?
Yeah.
If we were closer to the release date, and I guess we're not actually that far away, so maybe this still case. To me, this sounds like we can't finish this thing. Like, we can't finish what needs to be. So you have to be, at some point, you have to lock the code to be able to press discs, right?
Yeah.
And it feels to me like this is a thing where they went, the code, we will not be done with the code. So what we're going to do is just press what we have on the disc, but largely it may not even matter what's on the disc because you're just going to grab it from the distro of whatever the most recent version is. Now, because they've already done this before, what it really does seem like is that they are. I mean, it could be that they're just trying to make physical worthless, like forcibly make it worthless. They're doing this
Incentivizing digital
as a choice, right? I don't. I guess I don't know. I don't know what that really does, because people will still sell the disc for super cheap in a store, and if you put that disc in, you still get to download the full game.
Right.
Like, you get it.
Right.
Right.
It just feels to me like it is a, hey, we can keep working on this without having to worry about when we pressed actual physical discs.
But on the other side is you have games like Helldivers 2,
Right.
where they're like, we're going to make this super new fun part of
Right.
this game. I couldn't have imagined on a game that's complete done in, like, I buy it physically and that's it. You know,
Right.
other than maybe some DLC levels or whatever that I might buy later. But that game is so responsive to its players,
Right.
and it's creating a world that's like, if you're not playing it now,
You
you're
are
going to miss
missing
out on the experience now, and
Right.
you never get that again.
So
that to me is an advantage of digital entertainment.
you're right. Helldivers is a game that doesn't exist on disc. It literally. I mean, maybe there are discs of it, but
I have it on PS5.
So it is, but it is a game that, like, yes, it is happening, and it's a multiplayer game. That's the other thing, right? It's a multiplayer game, so you need the internet at some point to really even connect to the servers.
Fair, yeah.
So, but you're right. It is a unique experience. Star Wars Outlaws, as far as I'm aware, is a completely single-player game,
Okay, yeah.
and there will be microtransactions.
Well, it's Ubisoft.
So now,
And it's Star Wars.
Right.
so I played a lot of Helldivers. Let me tell you a little something about Helldivers.
Go on.
There is there are premium, what they call, it's kind of their battle pass, but it's war bonds. It's how you get new weapons. They have a big free one that they give you. Some of the best weapons are in the game. But then every month on the second Thursday, they put out a new one of these. New premium war bond. Costs $10. And it gives you some new weapons. You don't have to buy it. If you don't want those weapons, that's fine. But if you're playing seriously, you want it. Here's the thing: every one of these contains 300 credits, and you need 1,000 to get it. So every one that you buy, you get 300 back. They drop the credits in the game when you're playing it. As of now, I have earned, just from playing, enough for each one of the I bought the special edition, so I got one for free. I was then able to use that to earn the next one. I have 5 credits left to get the one that comes out tomorrow.
Wow.
So they do it like everybody else, where you're expecting it, but they're so generous. And here's the other thing: you play in a squad of 4, and when you pick up like an item, you raid these like little dumpsters or whatever. You find stuff in them. If someone goes and picks up the super credits, is what they're called, every single person in that group gets the amount they picked up. And they generally drop in 10. Sometimes they'll drop in 50, like, credits. But there's no, like, people will be like, oh, I'm going to go off and I'm just going to farm. It's like, well, great. If you pick them up, I get them. And you get them, and you don't even have to complete the mission. Like, you get them immediately.
Wow.
So it's a game
It kind of seems like people are really excited to play games that reward the players.
Yeah.
What a concept.
Yeah.
Weird.
And the funny thing is that Helldivers 2 seems to be doing great in terms of how much they've sold,
Yeah.
how well they're doing, and people are still spending money, because they'll even go, well, you guys gave me 90 credits for free. I'll give you $1 or 900 credits. I'll give you $1 to let me get the next war bond that comes out.
Right.
It's really funny how that works. I've looked at it and said, well, I would give these guys money, but they gave it to me already.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll buy some more credits for something else. Who knows? But it's like radically different in feel than seeing like Foam Stars. I don't know if you saw that game. $45 for a skin for a character that you aren't guaranteed to be able to play, because if someone else picks that character first, there's only allowed one. It's like a hero shooter. Kill the Justice League, right? Where like the characters are all free, you still have to grind to get them, but like the costumes are $20 for skins. And then Star Wars Outlaws, which I don't know what you're buying. Dragon's Dogma had microtransactions in that single player game. I know why they're doing this, because they need to squeeze all the money they can, because games cost way more.
Yeah.
Way more
Which
than
is-
they did before.
It's a reflection of the fact that I'm sure I'm not the first person to say this, but that the price of games, like for the disc, has not changed in 20 years.
Right.
So even though inflation has,
Right.
they need to recoup that cost
And
somewhere.
even that, so we talked about this a little bit before when we were looking at old ads for games. Like, games used to be really expensive, and they were when you adjust for inflation, they were super expensive. But that's because they were carts,
Right.
And we were paying for actual silicon.
Right.
And then CDs started coming out, and then games dropped. And then we had the big adjustment to $60, which was 360 era.
Yeah.
We started seeing $60 games, and that was such a thing. Now, that was roughly, games were like $50 in the PlayStation 2 era. $10. It's an increase for sure. But like, comparatively, games went from costing, I don't know, Katamari Damacy probably cost them like $1 million to make, right? And that was a gamble to bring it even over here. Like, they were talking about Spider-Man cost like $200 million.
Right.
So their costs have gone up dramatically.
Yeah.
And now they've raised it another $10. Now games are $69, $70, right? And then special editions are $80, and super special editions could be $100. But it's still, comparative to the cost, we're still getting what you would call, quote unquote, a deal. Now the issue is that nobody's making Katamari Damacy games. Nobody's making, like, the only people that are doing this are small indie developers, small companies. You know, Helldivers came out at $40 because they're like, well, we didn't make it doesn't have a campaign. It's
Right.
just, this is what it is. They've been rewarded for that with tons and tons of sales. But then, like, games like Final Fantasy Rebirth, they're like talking about, like, well, if we sell like 3 or 4 million, that's still not enough.
Yeah.
Because they spent a ton of money on it. It's a great game, but there's a lot of games where they're pulling the risk way back because they can't afford
Yeah.
to take the risk.
Yeah, I don't.
But guess what? The non-risky games starting to look like a line, right? Where it's just like, all these games are the same thing.
Right.
You know, I mean, even this Outlaws game, I don't necessarily know what it looks like exactly from, is it first person? Is it third person? I haven't seen any footage
I
of
think
it.
it's third person.
But I feel like it's not going to be far off from Ubisoft game, the game, right?
It's going to be an open map with a bunch of checkpoints.
There's going to be
and there's some
towers. Yeah. But, and, they make, like you said, Assassin's Creed, like, does it look just like Assassin's Creed if you squint?
Yeah.
That's kind of the bummer. And we saw with Larian Studios last year, they put out Baldur's Gate, and it was like, everybody was like, this feels super fresh and everything. Well, those guys won. They sold it early and made millions to fund its own development. They're not owned by a company. They don't have stock.
Right.
Like, if you really want to look at it, these games that come out that you feel are disappointing, that are big, huge games, and they come out and they're kind of just garbage. Look at the company that made it. See if they're publicly traded. When you start looking at these games that keep coming out that feel like there's no risk and filled with microtransactions, you might find that it's a publicly traded company. And that's because they have to do infinite growth. Every game has to sell way more than the last one did. Doesn't matter how much they spent on it. And then you look at all the interesting stuff coming out, and it's all tiny developers, single person studios, or companies that are private, that are like, we just put our own money into it. Hello Games,
Right.
for example, has put out, I don't know, 37 free updates to No Man's Sky. I don't know if there's ever been a charge past buying the game.
Yeah.
But they made so much money off the first game's sales that they have just funded themselves through it. Like, that's really what we're looking at when it comes to budget talk and stuff. And it's depressing because there's so many more of the big companies making the same game over and over again. But, for people who love Star Wars, I don't know what else to tell you. There's not anybody else making a Star Wars game, right?
Well, there is. It's EA, right? So,
so
much better.
I don't know. Is EA? I thought they're done.
Is the Respawn stuff done? Because Respawn's EA, right?
Yes, you were right. Well, they don't have
everyone's
the
two favorite
exclusive
companies, Ubisoft and EA.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a big license like that isn't going to end up in the hands of a small indie developer,
No.
Right.
anyways.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know. we'll get into this when we get to our viewer comments from last time, but I'll just briefly say this. $74.99 for Turok in 1999
Yep.
is... do you have an inflation calculator?
I'll figure that out.
Okay. But I want you to bear this in mind. $74.99 in the 90s is a lot more money than $74.99 today.
Correct.
Let's say today you bought a brand new game for $70, and then let's say you spent another $40 on additional levels, battle passes, microtransactions. So your total out of pocket when you're all said and done with the game, let's say it's $120. Okay? How much in 90s dollars was the $74.99 Turok the Dinosaur Hunter?
So Turok the Dinosaur Hunter, you said it was 74.
$74.99 according to a Toys R Us.
Today, you would pay $150.
So
It's double.
Right.
okay, hold on. So I'm getting way more game with way more resources for $120 after all the microtransactions, everything's done, than I did back then, but I just spent all the money up front at the beginning. I understand the argument that is being made, that it's like, yeah, but it's all there. Like whatever's advertised in the box, that's it. I got it. It's done. You can't. It's the feeling that I'm being taken advantage of
Correct.
by a company
Right.
that we're all upset about,
Yes.
and I agree with that.
It's the nickel and
it's
diming.
deceptive, and it's like, wait, I thought I paid for this experience. It's like going to the movie theaters and then going, well, if you want to see the last, the climax of The Sixth Sense here and find out the big twist
Well,
ending,
yeah.
you got to pay for it.
Who's actually dead?
Persona did that. Like they made you
Yeah.
pay for the ending, all that kind of stuff.
One of the best games on the 360, Asura's Wrath,
Yeah.
made you pay for the true ending.
Yep.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So
They gave you an ending on
Yeah.
the disc, and it tells you it's the bad, not real one.
yeah.
That's amazing.
But you need $10.
It's like,
but then
bam,
you could
bam,
also pay
bam, bam.
some extra money to fight Ryu and Akuma from Street Fighter on the moon. So that's kind of cool.
I mean, that is
Yeah.
you can't put a price on that.
Yeah, I mean, you could.
Yeah, I guess $10,
Either was
but-
$10. Yeah.
So you are still, even with microtransactions, even with all the extra fees, you're paying the equivalent today of about a $50 or $60 game.
Correct.
Back then, and then a lot of games don't have mandatory stuff like that to enjoy them, which is one of the games that I'm playing right now. But
Right. So
you-
there was a comment that was kind of saying like, and back then you got the whole game, and they're right.
they're right.
That is correct. For better or for worse, you got the full game.
Right.
Sometimes they didn't even finish those.
Right.
And what you got was it.
Yep.
But
We had to, how many times have you heard that story? We've rushed to meet a deadline. We couldn't put out the game we wanted, etc.
yeah. Oh, and that thankfully back then, in the good old days, when a game was bad, it just kind of was bad, and you kind of just knew it. Remember Driver 3?
Yeah, the whole
Driv
fiasco.
3er?
Yeah, Drifter.
Driv 3er.
Yeah.
Because they were coming out against, Grand Theft Auto and everything. But the crazy thing is that you would spend, at the time, the equivalent money on like Grand Theft Auto Vice City or, Driver, whatever.
Yeah.
You pay the same dollar amount, but you got radically different game.
Sure.
So when we talk about like games back then, they were complete. There are a lot of games that like fit that mold of like, yeah, and they were fantastic. And then there was a lot of crap that was the same price. You know how much on Super Nintendo the cart for Roadrunner's Revenge was? Like the Looney Tunes game?
No.
It was as expensive as like Chrono Trigger. And that game is terrible.
Yeah.
But we that's why we had magazines, right? We had
Could read the
reviews. Like
reviews.
you would go and rent the game.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you rented a game 5 or 6 times and you went, okay, I'm just gonna buy this.
Right.
Because,
Yeah.
well, I gotta stop renting Final Fantasy 3.
Right.
And just buy it. But that was the time where we solidified the idea of like the big games and these long games are worth more because you get more game for your dollar, right?
So I want to ask a question about that. Do you fundamentally look at your games as a dollar per hour ratio?
No.
I think that's always an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, totally.
I think of it that way, but I'm more concerned with dollar per fun.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So if I have a great time, with a like I would spend any amount of money on Spec Ops: The Line, and that game's 6 hours long.
Yeah.
I think that's $100 game.
Yeah.
because I thought that's the way they did it was. It's also you only kind of get it once.
So it's not it's not a quantity, it's also a quality per hour.
But at the same time, you can, if you buy a game that's not very fun and very short, that feels bad.
For sure.
If you buy a game that's amazing and short, you're usually okay with it.
Right.
Yeah.
If you buy a game that's amazing and too long, I start getting frustrated with it.
Right.
But then I at least feel like I got my money because I'm
Right.
like, oh, I don't have to finish this.
Right.
I remember this with Uncharted 4. Like the first half or so of
Yeah.
that game was like, this is the best game I've
Yep.
ever played. And then it puts you in a Jeep and like the open area, and all of a sudden it's like, this is the most side quest bananas bloated. None of this exists. Like if they would have kept the taut tension intensity of that first part of the game.
Remember, aren't you done with that? After you are done with that Jeep, you never go back to it again.
I don't remember.
I think it's a very weird, out of place. Like
Yeah. It felt like they were like
everything halts all of a sudden.
yeah.
And then I feel like the back half of that is way too much of just trying to get to a pirate ship.
Yeah. No, totally.
Half of that game is like, we know where it is. We just got to walk there.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And then you get there and they're like, your princess is in another castle.
This thing's falling apart.
Yeah. Oh, I got it. Oh, no. Again.
It was fine until you stood on it.
Yeah.
Now it's all falling apart.
Womp womp.
You gotta leave.
Classic Drake.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. Well, lots to be said about this.
Yep.
I appreciate everyone's passionate responses. This is a subject people care very much about, and I wonder, what do they care about? I think they care about not being taken advantage of, but also enjoying this very wonderful and fun hobby.
Yeah.
And they're protective of it.
Yeah, and I think that I don't think that there's a exact formula across the board, because we have examples of games that do it well, but I think that it is important, because it is important to recognize that there are times when you feel exploited.
Yes.
And that is a bad feeling.
Yes.
And that's bad that the companies do it. And I wish there was a way for you to be able to figure that out before you spend the regular money on it.
Right.
Which, that's where free-to-play games come in. But free-to-play games, it's almost like a bad feeling immediately, because you're like, oh, well, I already know they're going to nickel and dime me for everything.
Yeah, it's the worst.
Right off the bat. So maybe I'll just avoid it completely.
The gotcha machine's coming around the corner,
Totally.
Call it demo games.
Right.